Welcome to the Mindset Game podcast. I'm excited to introduce you to Pam Boney today. Pam is the founder and CEO of Tilt365.com, a disruptor in the personality assessment space. Her company designs and builds innovative assessments in the positive psychology and strengths domain. She and her team of over 600 change agent practitioners are devoted to growing the number of conscious leaders around the world. Welcome, Pam. This is such a treat to have you here today.
Thank you. I'm delighted, of course.
So let's start off by explaining what do you mean by conscious leaders or conscious leadership, and what do you think is most important for anyone listening here to know today?
Well, the word that comes to mind when I would think about conscious leadership is choice. That you're choosing and being intentional about how you're behaving and showing up with people. Not always, because none of us are perfect. We all have our moments, but um, when we say we're aspiring to be conscious, it's that we're self-aware and we're choosing that we want to be a certain way, even though we might have feelings that would be urging us to be different.
I love that because I think that's the essence of empowerment is that conscious, deliberate choice. So, what is the one thing that you most want people to know? You've had such a wide range of experiences, have worked with so many leaders. What's most important?
Yeah, I first of all, I just say I love coaching and working with leaders that are aspiring to, do great things in the world, or, that come to work each day and just love what they're doing. So it is a kind of a sacred honor that we get, that we're working with leaders that care about leading well and, making the world better and contributing and being generative personally, and being an inspiration for others. I guess the one thing that I like working with them on or teaching them that they might not get from other people is the work that I've spent my life on, which is the research of what is it that makes us feel strong self-esteem on the inside versus help makes us implode and feel fearful on the inside. um, and because I started out in my career, I was in the hospitality industry. I started out as a person that did feel, a lot of insecurities. Um, because of that, it's become my life's work. And so I kind of figured out that the more I feel good about myself on the inside and the more I align myself with behaviors that align with good values, the happier I became and the better leader I became. So when I saw that connection, that, when I do the right thing or when I do what feels like it's the right thing with other people, I actually get the reward of feeling, happy and good with myself. And it builds on itself and makes you feel stronger from the inside out. So that's the most important thing that I try to help, people that come into my calls, like feeling anxious or worried or, like uh, maybe stressed out or a sense of urgency or, some of the strivings that we do where we're thinking that we're going to get external rewards that are going to make us happy. No, it's always inside that's going to create that happiness.
Yeah, I'm with you on that 100%. And I think that intuitively everybody listening knows this because they've probably tried other things that maybe
Hmm.
didn't work, right? The
Yeah.
only way to fill those gaps, if you will, to fill those deeper needs is from the inside. And so let's talk a little bit more about that. I know that some of the research that you do is about kind of connecting with our kind of inner character strengths, and in an effort to bring more connection rather than separation, both internally, right, for each of us, but also in our world during these times of unprecedented change. So share with us a little bit around that. What is important for people to know, and what specifically can they do to create more of that inner harmony within themselves?
Inner harmony is a great word for it, because it's when we're in inner conflict that, like we have one part of us saying you should do this and another part of us saying you should do this. It's all archetypal. We have whole teams of, these parts inside of us that divide us internally. And then when we're divided internally, we actually externalize it, and then we create divisiveness in our relationships. And how we know, like, this is one of my favorite things. How we know that we're doing that is when we're striving too much and we're showing up in an extreme. So when we do that, we know it's a clue that we're operating from fear, and it's not real fear. Like, real fear would be, lions chasing us and we need to run, like that protects us, and we need that fear so that we don't die, in a real situation like that. But what we don't realize is that there are also hidden fears. There are also ego fears, what I call ego fears, that are constructed based on the family we grew up in, and the fears that we imagined as a child, like, I feel rejected, or I feel like I'm never enough, or I feel like I don't have any freedom. My parents are trying to control every single thing. Those sorts of fears that are shaped in the early years come back to haunt us over and over again, throughout our lives. And so when that happens, that's when we're going to react in an extreme that has the maturity level of when it first began. So it's when I act like an 8-year-old. So when I notice, I'm trying to be in a conversation with somebody, and now I'm thinking I'm right and they're not right, that creates divisiveness, but it always gives me the clue that I've reverted into a, less mature version of myself.
So, so tell us a little bit more about these what you call these ego fears. What do you mean by that?
So it's related to our personality, and ego is important. A lot of people think, oh, ego, that's a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. Healthy ego is a really good thing. But healthy ego is, I'm okay. So it's me thinking I'm okay when I have healthy ego. So the fears are coming forward when we think we're not okay. Like, I'm not enough. I'm never enough. That kind of feeling. Or, I feel vulnerable, like that person's trying to take advantage of me. So I fear vulnerability. And when that happens, I'm going to do something. So my ego is going to cause me to act in response to those fears. And so when I do, often it's an overreaction, because it's, goes way back in our history, and, it doesn't always have the same level of maturity that the conscious self has.
So what do you see in the research around how those unconscious patterns, or those unconscious fears are intervening with our leadership or with our daily life?
Yeah, so they're whenever we are encountering change in the world, for example, which it's unprecedented right now. The clients we're working with are going through really difficult times. Particularly this year, we serve a lot in the tech industry, and so they're all doing layoffs and cost cutting and things like that. So when that happens, it triggers everyone to worry about themselves personally. So the 4 fears that kind of show up are, what's going to happen with my title? And that affects us, in terms of how we feel about status. Like, is my status going to be impaired? Am I going to lose some status? Am I redundant? Another one is my power. Is my territory going to shrink? Is are my FTEs going to be less, or am I going to lose my job entirely? Another one is approval, like, oh, we have this new company coming in. They don't know who I am from Adam, so they're going to be, I've built all this, spent all this time building these relationships. Now what? So I feel this loss or abandonment of the people that I have spent all this time building relationships with. And another fear is freedom. a recognition, like, am I going to be limited in my freedom? Am I going to still have the same kind of creative license that I had in my previous role? So when any kind of, external change is happening, that's when all of a sudden I'm going to start worrying about me. And when I start worrying about me is when I'm now going to be like me and them. And whenever we separate like that, there's the chance that we're gonna be focused on the wrong thing, which is worrying, being concerned, going and talking to other people about it, being negative, having a negative mindset. When really being conscious means being present and saying, yeah, all that's going on and something could happen, but I'll be okay. And so I have a job to do today, though, and I'm still being paid by the company. So really, if I just focus today on what I can do to contribute, then I keep myself okay and I keep myself in a productive way and I reduce the self-fulfilling prophecy that could happen if I continue to choose to worry or I continue to choose to be upset and spread negativity. So it's like that.
And I think it's really helpful that you have separated that into these four fears, which I sense everyone listening to some degree has experienced that, whether it is
We
in the work
all,
context in terms of title or power, maybe in relationship, and so on. Certainly freedom, approval, right? That we feel that growing up. So I'm curious now, you even used the word self-fulfilling prophecy. And, that presupposes that our energy, right? How we think about the change, how we feel about the change, what we do, right? As you said, focusing on what I can control or influence today in the
mm-hmm,
midst of change or chaos, that all of that has an effect on what actually will happen. So
mm-hmm.
tell us more about that.
Yeah, I was just, as you were saying all of that, I was like, yeah, I always have to even remind myself, right, that if I'm suffering, I'm creating that suffering somehow, you know. So, and I mean, it does, we don't, you and I are experts in this and we've been studying it for years. It doesn't make us immune to what happens inside of a human being, right? So whenever I'm working with my clients, I'm like, hey, I'm right here beside you. I'm not above you, right? I am, just as equally upset with myself, regularly about like, well, that wasn't being a good leader. I could do that differently. So I think that's partly one of the most important messages that we can bring, right? As people helping others be their best self, that nobody's ever going to get it right 100%. In fact, people that are trying to be perfect aren't so fun to be around. So, we have to kind of give ourselves a break and be kind to ourselves. So, when I see somebody in stress and even a client being, rude or, like somebody being really in a bad place, I try to remember like they're just suffering at the moment. There's something that they're suffering with. And if I can be the one that kind of, is forgiving about that and just say, they're just suffering. Let me just reach in and see what I can, do to help relieve their suffering. Just be with them in their suffering. Then, it's being a witness to someone in their humanity in the moment is a beautiful gift. Like that's what our friends give us, right? And our family gives us. And so I see that as my, duty or my, that's probably not the best word, but I try to approach each day with who can I serve today in that way. And of course it's coming from, a place of wanting to love, my fellow humans. But it also helps me to feel that way about me, you know. So
Yeah.
we're social beings and that's what we need. And so whenever we can recognize that somebody else is suffering and we can kind of go in there and help with that suffering and help relieve it and not see it as an affront to us, even if they're being rude to us, that can help, that can go a long way to us being able to be part of the solution and not contributing to the problem of divisiveness.
Yeah. Thank you. And by extension of that, what's really cool is that our unconscious mind, right, these very protective parts of us are, they take things literally. So when we extend kindness and compassion, or at the very least curiosity for others, uh, our mind thinks we're actually doing it for ourselves. So it's self-compassion, self-forgiveness, self-curiosity,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a beautiful thing, because then that allows us to have even more of that inner harmony that we began our conversation with. So let's take it back for those people listening, that let's say they're in that place, there's some change or transition that's happening. They are more conscious now of, this worry or feeling of distress or threat or danger, that their title, their power, the approval. Remind me, what was the fourth again? The freedom?
Freedom, approval, power, and status. Yeah.
Beautiful, status. So if I'm, let's say, becoming conscious that I'm, worried or fearful of losing some or all of those things,
Mm-hmm.
what do I do?
Yeah. So those things all happen if we're in the past or if we're in the future in our thinking. So as soon as we start thinking about when the past this happened, that could happen again, we're probably in fear, or we're moving it into the future. This thing's going to happen. I'm sure I'm going to, this is going to happen. We're going to eventually have to lay people off. There might be redundancies, etc. So letting our thoughts wander off into the past or the future takes us out of the present. And when we're in the present, it's impossible to be, you know, in those bad places. So it's always center and focus on right now. And what can you do that is going to be something that's good for you, for the world, for the people around you, something that's gonna really be something that correlates back to your own happiness. Like I think about happiness a lot because I think 30 years ago I wasn't happy and realized, had this really, this moment of realization that external things are never going to make me happy. Money, you can never have enough money, you can never have the best job, you can never have every single thing that you want that's going to make you happy. And all of it relates to, if I want that job and that money, it's because I want to be happy. And I think that the things that that job and that money are going to bring are going to make me happy. No, what makes us happy is actually being in the moment and enthralled with something. Like recently, I've started painting. And when I'm in the moment and painting, it's so joyful because really, I'm just kind of challenging my mind to produce what's in my imagination on a canvas. And so it's impossible to be unhappy, when you're doing, I mean, you can certainly get unhappy with your painting, start judging yourself about your painting. But if you're truly immersed in the moment, which we are at work, if I'm immersed in the work that I'm doing in the moment, it's kind of hard for my mind to be off being all upset or worried. So, and the more we do these, do things right now that produce that, the more they get wired into our brain, and it increases the chance that we're going to continue to constantly be happy. Whereas if we're always in the past worrying about all the things we did wrong, or didn't do right or didn't do enough, or all the things that we are yet to do and we've got to rush to do it. Oh my gosh, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. If whenever we're in those two things, we're producing, wiring in our brain that makes us feel we're never enough, we don't have enough the right relationships, we don't have enough freedom, we don't have enough of anything. So it's really about that. It's capturing yourself back in the moment.
Yeah. And interrupting that old pattern, whatever that
Mhm.
pattern might be, self-regulating and refocusing on something that will move
Mhm.
us toward a more positive outcome. So I know you've done a lot of research in the kind of arenas of positive psychology, kind of what happens in the brain Would you share a little bit of that with us so that those individuals that are hearing us, which are curious but maybe a little skeptical,
Mm-hmm.
um, that might help them to uh, have even more evidence that adapting their own uh, emotions, thoughts, right, working on that in the moment behaviors could actually shift the outcomes in their work life and in their personal life.
I might say something surprising here, but
Yes.
when you said skeptical, I actually think skeptical is a good thing. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, you do too, I'm sure, but um,
Absolutely.
yeah, so some people think positive psychology means that you're all la la and everything's going to be wonderful and it's all everything in the world is positive. But I actually have studied deeply that some people will overuse optimism and overuse positivity such that they actually become gullible and become a dreamer that never does and so on. So I think positive strengths, character strengths, which is my domain, character strength development requires knowing your propensities about how you think and then focusing on the things that balance you out and help you to be what to develop the things that kind of counterbalance the thing that you might overextend. So some people do overextend skepticism and overextend negative thinking, but negative thinking in general is not bad. It's actually very good. We need to have it. We need to have discernment. We need to have good logical reasoning, and we need to have a good sense of guardianship for ourselves. That no is a good thing. No is just as important as yes. So it's a positive psychology. And when I say that, what I mean is positive strengths and character strengths and keeping them all in the balance of positive self-regard.
Tell us a little bit more about that, about kind of the connection between these character strengths and positive self-regard. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so it's knowing your first inclination. So it's your pattern that you started with that was your strategy for surviving your family of origin. And we all had it. We all had innate tendencies in our personality that we inherited. And you can see that personality when a baby's tiny, right? So we start there. But then when we're in the family of origin, we have reactions to who we are. And so those get recorded in a way inside us that become our strategy for how it is that we survive that family of origin. But it only works for that family system. So the challenge is when we go out into the world and we try to do the same thing, it doesn't work the same. So every system that we're in, we have to kind of resuss it out, like what is this? Who am I here? And who are they here? And how is the dynamic here? Um, I think that's why the world is so stressed right now. It's because in the last 100 years, if you think about it, nobody stays in the same geography anymore. Nobody stays with the same people anymore. Nobody's, keeps the same job for their life. So we're encountering new human systems all the time. And the one that we were wired up for the first 20 years, doesn't work in all of those systems. So imagine how stressful that is. So the brain is brilliant like that. It wires up for what we encounter. So which is why, we go and take a job at a new company. For a while, we're very disconcerted, like everything's different. So our brain's kind of in overload, learning. And of course, it can be fearful to be in that situation. Like, oh, this is different. I don't know what to do. What I used to do didn't work anymore. And that happens in everywhere we go now. So it's, we have to have a greater sense of control, locus of control inside ourselves so that wherever we go, we're open to learning from that new system. And we're able to go, okay, I don't get it, but I'll figure it out. you know? So yeah, it's a tough world we're living in. You add social media and all the pressure and all the like what kids are dealing with today and how, you don't even know if you're really talking to the person on the other side, that is really a real person. And, we're all looking at other people's lives on social media and think, oh, their life is so much better than mine. It's just the world is very, very challenging today to the self-esteem.
Yeah. So what's going through my mind now as you share this is this concept that, we all have these character strengths, these
Hmm.
inner character strengths
Hmm.
that are who we are at our essence, right? Like the core essence of who we are, these beautiful gifts that we've been given. And when any of those are overextended, right, to the extreme, that's when it gets to be maladaptive, and that's when we have extreme responses and so on. But what's interesting is, as you talked about that divisiveness earlier, the separation or the illusion of separation, right? So if I have one character strength, in order for me to know I have that or to express that, I need to have the opposite,
Hmm.
another part of me, an equally valuable part of me on
Hmm.
the opposite side, right? And it's the dance between the two, right? So how to know how to sometimes be, let's say, skeptical and sometimes not to be, right? There
Yeah.
are times when it's appropriate to be and not to be, as you said, or to take risks or whatever it might be. And and so the more that we could get to know our inner world, get to know these different parts of us, the more that we can understand what are those fears, how, what fears are they behaving out of, what's showing up, and the more that we could have more of that inner harmony.
Yeah,
And
and agility. What I'm hearing you articulate is that dance of agility. It's like, okay, the context is changing. So who am I in that new context? Yeah.
yeah. So a change is happening. Let's play the game of, let's say the company's going through, going to be going through some layoffs, or we as the leader are going to be needing to initiate some changes that we might not feel congruent about or happy
Hmm.
about. And so we're noticing these fears and worries and doubts showing up. And in that moment, it's really important to pause and just label, what am I feeling as I focus on this? What am I thinking as I focus on that? Maybe some sensations in the body. And then we begin to notice these different parts and give them a voice. And I think that's such an important thing to pause and do. And then, as you said, to kind of self regulate, to focus on something that will help us to feel even better in the moment, or to be choosing things even more consciously. So let's say we do that, right? So we're
Yeah.
conscious of it, right? We're going inward, we're noticing, we're kind of self-regulating our system by just being present, right? Noticing literally what's going on in our world around us and so on. Then what? What will all of that do? What's the next step?
Yeah. So I'm thinking what you're saying is great. The word noticing, is important. So just noticing it first and then even having a name for it, like, okay, yeah, I'm having a negative thought at the moment that could be, could be I could get laid off. Um, but then what do you do with that? Either you can ruminate and make it worse, or you can take a couple deep breaths and say, well, I have a lot of experience and it's not like I've never had to have a new job before. But it doesn't mean it's going to happen to me, or it doesn't mean that and if it does happen to me, I'll be okay. So it's trusting yourself, I guess. But it's the noticing, it's the naming, and then it's taking a deep breath and taking a pause, not acting on it with other people and spreading your fears or worries or negativity. And then coming back to yourself and coming back to yourself with, the confidence that I've had experiences that were hard, and sometimes those hard experiences were the things that made me better at who I am. So that's character building. It's having faith in your character that when you go through something really, really hard, you're going to come out on the other side better in some way. So it's, embracing life and that life isn't all positive.
Yeah. And it's a really great idea to reflect back to times maybe when we experience setbacks or hardships, and and how we've evolved, right? Things we've learned, maybe people we've met as a result. And of course, anytime we can extend compassion, curiosity, kindness to others, even when we're in the deep, you know, pain, in the depth of our suffering, that too can help us to pull ourselves out of that and to remember um, that we can feel good no matter how hard things are. So this has been so incredibly empowering. Lots of tidbits that you have shared with us today, and I really honor and admire the work that you do with your assessment. I know multiple people that are practitioners that have utilized it with clients, and I've heard wonderful things. Would you be willing to share with us a little bit more about the TILT assessment, about your work, and how people can get in touch with you?
Yeah, for sure. Just briefly, we create assessments that help with that self-awareness. So help us really understand, like, what are my particular fears that are going to pop up that I really should learn how to, manage, and how can I develop the strength of the polarity that you were talking about earlier? If I tend to be overly optimistic, I need to also learn some skepticism, or if I tend to be skeptical and always come from there, I need to learn how to be positive and optimistic. So the assessments really just help you with the self-awareness of the two preferences that you've developed in that family of origin. So, and then what do you do to become more whole in all four parts of yourself and heal those needs, fill those needs and learn how to do that yourself. And then produce that kind of agility internally that no matter what happens out here, I can still show up and be strong. And in being strong, I will produce externally more generativity, which is the goal of the whole suite of assessments. So it's inside out development that starts with inside and contributes to the world outside.
And how can people learn even more about this amazing tool and the work that you do?
They just come to our website, tilt365.com, and we have a Let's Talk button. You can make an appointment. My calendar's on there. Everybody's calendar's on there. We would always welcome talking to anybody about what they're working on and what their concerns are, or what they need to work on. So we're always open.
Well, I thank you for your time today. I thank you for your commitment to helping people feel even more empowered, be even more, that conscious leader, first and foremost, of their own inner family, their own inner system, and of
Yeah.
course, leaders in the more literal sense in our world, because that self-awareness is so important, and giving them a tool to help them to do that, to understand how they're showing up, what those overextensions might be, so they can balance and come back to that inner harmony and be more generative to our world for others, is just such a loving thing to do. So thank you.
Love it. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it so much. It's been a delight, actually. So thank you.
I feel the same. Thank you. Thank you, Kat.